Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Pickle Hiatus.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to go first? Will I go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
So the word that I have today is pickle.
Ooh. That's fun to say.
First of all, yes, it is. Second of all, pickle is I love pickles. I just thoroughly enjoy pickles. I will eat them whenever they are available. Grown-up Lunchables are my favorite because usually charcuterie boards are accompanied by a gigantic bowl or plate of pickles of at least one or two varieties, and that's my jam. And but also, pickles are the source of the single greatest workplace conversation I've ever had in my entire life.
Ooh.
This was when I was there was a woman working at the office I was working at, and it was one of those, like, next to us we had a little, like, lunch place at the time. Right. It's now a full-blown catering spot, but at the time it was just sort of a up-and-coming lunch spot type of thing. And they did this sort of they did a lot of dill dishes. It was one of their sort of signature things. Okay. So they had this dill-based soup, which was very, very tasty.
That does sound good.
And at the time, it was lunch. I had some work to do. I was staying in the office. This other woman who worked in a different department was in the office, and most other people had gone out for lunch. But she had got this dill soup. I had it before. I don't remember what I had, but she made a remark about, it's weird how there's no pickles in this, but it tastes like pickles. And I was like, well, I mean, that'll be the dill, right? Sure. And she was like, yeah, well, I mean, I guess, but why? And I was like, well, because dill is generally a key ingredient when they make pickles. And she went, what do you mean when they make pickles? And I said, what do you mean? What do you mean when they make pickles? And she said, well, you don't make pickles. She didn't
think that pickles
She said, you don't make pickles, you grow them. And I went,
wow, I
love today. So I do honestly, I try to, there's that XKCD comic about how for every thing in the world that, quote, everybody knows, there's like 30,000 people learning it that day or something. So I try to keep that in mind. So I sort of said, well, no, like, the pickles are just small cucumbers that have been soaked in a brine and preserved and all the rest of the stuff, right? Like, that's how that works. And then it became a game, because then she didn't believe me.
Wow.
And so we had this conversation for the rest of the time until people started coming back. And then every single person that came back into the office, she had to stop them on the spot and ask them, be like, Tammy, where do pickles come from? It's like, cucumbers? She's like, damn it. All right, John, where do pickles come from? And he's like, cucumbers, what are we doing here? Damn it. And it went on like that as every single person came back to the office. And so, long story short, I loved that day, and I called her Pickles for the next 3 years.
So, where do pickles come from? Sounds like a terrible but brilliant game show.
Yeah. It does.
Like, I recently, I can't remember if I told you about this or not, but out of sheer morbid curiosity, my husband and I recently sat through an episode of a game show called Is It Cake?
Oh, yeah, my kids enjoy that, so I have seen that.
Yeah. We did not enjoy it. We were agog.
No, I would imagine you would absolutely hate it.
It was an experience, but not one that I would like to repeat. It was genuinely just people making cake that looked like other stuff. It felt like the made up horrific TV in Brazil or some other dystopian future where everyone is really stupid. That's what it felt like to me. But I love this because I love that she didn't know that pickles were made. That's just brilliant. And you're right, it is one of those things where like dear listener, I think it's testament to the fact that Ryan is fundamentally a really good guy, because he didn't immediately go, what? Pickles aren't grown, you doofus. You know, you said, oh, well, let's talk about this. Let me explain. I'm not going to lie, I might have possibly done the former. I don't know. Who knows?
Well,
Who knows what you're going to do?
I would just like to point out that what I said was, I try to do that. I'm
Fair
not
enough.
convinced that I didn't fail in this particular instance, but...
Your attempts are appreciated, though. But also, the first time I ate a dill pickle was because of you.
Really?
You made me eat a dill pickle. Now, I should also point out that...
I mean, I don't regret it, but I don't remember that either.
Up until maybe, like 5 years ago, like an arbitrary number of years, but for the whole rest of my life outside those 5 years, I utterly detested cucumber. To the extent that if someone gave me a salad with cucumber in it, and then said, oh, you don't like cucumber, I'll take the cucumber out, it wouldn't matter. The salad would still be ruined, because it would, even if you'd removed every single piece of cucumber from that salad.
You knew they were there.
No, it would just still taste of cucumber. And people would say to me, how can you hate cucumber? It doesn't taste of anything. And I'm like, you have no idea, shut up. And, you know, when you don't like it, it has such a terribly strong taste. I once heartily dipped a Dorito into what I thought was a pot of sour cream and chive dip, and it turned out to be tzatziki.
Oh, that would not be a good day for you.
I was an adult at that point, and I literally did what small kids do, and I opened my mouth and just let it fall out of my mouth because I was so disgusted by the taste of this cucumber. And then when you lived in Yeongamdong, you had been home, and you had come home with a whole load of Canadian goodies.
Yeah.
And I, you know, as a small country girl, had never seen double stuffed Oreos. But what I really remember is that I had never seen pre-made ice cream sized tubs of buttercream icing before either. So the Oreos were good, but the icing, whoa, mind blown. Yeah. But there was also, you had a big jar of dill pickles, and you were like, you've got to try. And I said, I've never had a dill pickle. And you were aghast at the fact that I'd never had this. And I said, well, I don't like you. I really, really hate cucumber. At which point, all Canadians in the room were like, pickles don't taste of cucumber, don't be ridiculous, they taste of dill, they're delicious, shut up and eat the pickle. So I caved to the mighty, mighty power of peer pressure, and I ate a dill pickle. And it was pretty good, considering it was made out of a thing that I really, really hate. Because it mainly tasted of dill. You know, like as you are aware, dill pickles taste of dill. But about 5 years ago, I literally woke up one morning going, I really want some cucumber, and now it is one of the most delicious things in the world. I eat it very often. I really enjoy it. Who knows? That was mad. I hadn't had a brain injury as far as I'm aware, but yeah. So I would now very happily eat pickled cucumbers. I was once almost asked to leave a party because I was following some crazy diet, and I took a jar of pickled onions with me to eat as a snack. And it turned out that my hostess had very strong feelings about the smell of vinegar and the smell of onions. So I promised to eat my snack in the kitchen and only in the kitchen, and you know, that was the compromise that we came to. This is the other thing that wows me about where do pickles come from, because, like, is it the case in your part of the world that pickles are always pickled cucumber?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right. So, like, surely you can get pickled silver skin onions, because they are like one of life's greatest joys.
You can get them, and you do see, like, jar of sort of mixed pickled vegetables
Yeah,
sometimes, but it's definitely like a retro thing.
Right. Okay.
And you can get in some of they all kind of have a bit of a retro feel to them, because like pickled eggs are still a thing.
Oh God, yeah,
But-
pickled eggs are still a thing.
But
There was a terrible meme a couple of years ago. A supermarket chain in the UK. God alone knows how this came about, but basically, someone had been in the supermarket and had observed that they were selling plastic bags filled with liquid, filled with hard-boiled eggs, and they called it a bag of wet eggs, and the internet went crazy. No one was pleased about the wet eggs. Pickled eggs. Lots of people really love them, but my experiences of seeing them in chip shops as a small girl, and they just look like some sort of terrible anatomical
well, that's what
specimen.
when I picture them in a jar on like a bar where if people aren't allowed to smoke, they were allowed to smoke for 40 years.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And then it stopped, and then nothing about the bar changed in the intervening 25 years. Like that's the kind of place I pictured pickled eggs. But so they do exist, but predominantly like you would never hear someone say pickled cucumbers.
Got you.
Because those are just pickles.
Got you.
And that's kind of just how that goes. So
anyway, back to pickles.
Yeah, on that note, my idea for this word came from my kids actually asking, and it's cool that they're asking these sort of questions because apples and trees and all that, but asking whether pickles were called, like whether they were pickled because things were becoming like pickles, or whether pickles were called that because of the process by which they become pickles, if that makes any sense at all.
People often feel insecure about their parenting, but you're doing something right.
So I was like, that's a good question. I don't actually know that. So off to the internet. It's an old-ish word. Goes back to the first half of the 1400s.
Oh, that's much older than I was expecting, in fact.
Yeah, originally it meant it was a spicy sauce served with meat.
Right.
So you would have, lamb and some pickle, or a steak and some pickle, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then by the 1500s, it had sort of morphed, and then it included the brine, basically the liquid, vinegary, briny solution that a food was preserved in. But it also meant the sauce. So it was sort of taking on one of those wibbly wobbly periods where it meant several different things at once. But spicy sauce with meat or the brine that stuff was made into was the 14 and 1500s. The earliest OED example of the sense of like a vegetable or chunks of vegetables preserved in the brine, and the vegetables were the pickle as opposed to the brine, was 1663. Okay. So it took a while.
That's really wild, because I suppose I assumed that pickling was as old as dirt, like the process of preserving things like that, because there were no refrigerators, there were not very many good methods for preserving things beyond salting them and drying them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then again, here's and this is probably going to be one where for many people listening, my uppance has come. I don't know how vinegar is made. And I don't know where, is there a natural source of vinegar?
Well, pickles, stick with me.
Is there a spring?
Vinegar is, that would be amazing.
I mean, I know what it is, it's a diluted acid, but I don't know where it comes from and how old how old vinegar is. I don't know how old vinegar is.
Vinegar is as old as life itself, I would argue.
Because it's just garbage wine, right?
See, this again, it's one of these beautiful little cultural nuggets that gives an insight into your life that you're not aware that you're giving other people. But I recently overheard a group of women in my life. I'll not name any names. They were having a conversation about what to do with leftover wine.
Right. Now, that seems really like a silly conversation to have.
Just crazy. Yeah, just crazy.
Leftover wine?
What to do with leftover wine? Don't have any.
Yeah.
I don't even particularly like to drink wine. If you gave me a choice of all the various delicious alcoholic things out there to drink, wine would be very, very far down my list, because despite our pirate days of yore, I don't like it particularly, and
right.
I tend to get absolutely destroyed drinking it, because I drink it at roughly the same pace that I tend to drink beer. And of course wine's much stronger than
right.
beer, so disasters happen.
Yeah.
You know this story, I don't need to tell you about that. But
I do.
What happens if you have leftover wine is especially if you've ever had cleaned up from a party the next day and there's been a half-drunk glass of wine left somewhere, the wine will be vinegar.
Yeah.
It turns to vinegar as a process of fermentation of pretty much anything that has any sort of sugar in it. So the bacteria that ferment into alcohol, eventually the byproduct of that fermentation will start to become acidic. So the acid, the acetic acid produced as a kind of a waste product by those bacteria is what causes vinegar. So
vinegar tells you were imprudent in either your consumption or your ordering of wine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can make vinegar from all sorts of things. Like you can make it from shavings of the balsam tree, which gives you balsamic vinegar. You can make it from malt, which is the most commonly, I seem to have a lot of chip shop references in this particular conversation, but malt vinegar is almost always what you would put on chips in this country, and we do. You can make it from all sorts of things, but essentially you don't really have to make it. You have to stop it being made.
Right. It's something that will happen.
Yeah.
If you aren't drinking fast enough. Or just enough. Right. Okay. Yeah. So then it is weird. That's true. See, that was one of those things, like, of course I knew that wine becomes vinegar because wine goes bad and that's what happens. But I had...
Also, the etymology of the word vinegar contains the word vine.
Because it contains the word vine. Right.
It's not an accident.
No. Makes perfect sense. I should not do this because... I think when and this is one of these weird language things, like how in Korea the base word for something, like here it's onions, and then if you want green onions you got to specify.
Sure.
Whereas in Korea the basic word, I think it was pa, is for the green onions, and then you have the other word, the modified word for the bigger regular kind of white onions or whatever. When here in Canada, it's like if you want vinegar, what you get is white vinegar, just.
Yes.
And then you can have malt or balsamic or apple cider or rice wine vinegar or whatever. But so I think in my head, and I'm going to blame the fact that I haven't had breakfast or coffee yet, it was kind of like, okay, I knew that wine becomes vinegar, but
why?
I thought there was some other thing for the white vinegar. But anyway. It doesn't matter.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I think the most common way to make malt vinegar is to distill it. So it's not just a matter of leave some malt and water mixed somewhere and you'll end up with, you will end up with a substance that tastes vinegary, certainly.
Right, yeah.
But to actually produce, as you say, white vinegar, I believe it's generally distilled. That's about as much as I know. As an inveterate label reader, distilled white vinegar is, something that I've read many, many times.
There you go.
Also, vinegar is delicious.
Well, yes.
I don't know about you. Sometimes I feel like I have a bit of a problem with vinegar. I put it on chips, and then sometimes I get halfway through eating the chips and realise that there's just not enough vinegar on there, so I'll put on some more. Oh
yeah, always.
Yeah. It's so good.
Stupid
and it makes your face
potatoes
feel
and their
funny.
absorption factor.
And it makes your eyebrows sweat. This is totally a thing that I thought was just me, and then I met Ross, and it turns out he does it too.
Huh.
So
I did
very
not know
sharp
that.
vinegar makes my eyebrows sweat.
Interesting. We're learning all kinds of things today.
Learning all kinds of things.
So where were we? Yeah. Okay. So the time, it was sort of the 1600s, it seems. Mid 1600s that it morphed from, it changed from being the sauce and then being the brine to being the vegetable in the brine were the pickles. But in between those two things is where we get the term being in a pickle, like being in a spot of trouble. Because the idea that the earliest citation for that is 1562. And I mean, the idea, which sort of makes sense, is that anything that was in a pickle, whether it was a sauce, a condiment type of sauce, or in a preserving brine, was not in for a great time. In short,
Yeah.
you know, like, so if you're in a pickle, you're either being sauced or being preserved, and yeah, you're not about to have a whole lot of fun. So that makes sense.
It's such a lovely, mild expression. You
Yeah.
know, like you can sort of rank language on. I'm thinking about it's the sort of thing that someone who objects to bad language might say instead of, you know, I'm up shit creek, or I'm in the shit, or, you know, something like, oh,
Yeah.
this is a bit of a pickle.
It's-
But
I'm
there's
in
something
quite a
quite
pickle.
charming about that.
Yeah, I knew a guy in school when I was doing my master's who his normal, like his sort of go-to euphemistic expletive was pickles. And it was
That's
Yeah.
that's sort of adorable.
that's exactly the word I was just thinking of. Like it just
Yeah.
was. By the late 1700s, a pickle was a slang term for a troublesome person, usually a boy, because, of course. And no, it's not. Anyway,
Well, you know what happens to the troublesome women?
Troubles, yeah.
Off to the asylum with them.
Off to the, yeah, they weren't kept around long enough to be given adorable vegetable-based nicknames.
No, they were not.
They were just done away with for their crazy
Yes.
ideas like, hey, how about I just feed myself and maybe I could eat first sometimes? And no, Alice, sorry.
To the straitjackets.
Yeah. So etymologically, it seems to come from the Middle Dutch, and I'm just going to say Pickle because it's Pekel, and I don't know Middle Dutch, or indeed any Dutch. And that means, again, either pickle or brine. So from that earliest sense, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of related and similar words that show up in like Low German, East Frisian, all these other Germanic
Yeah,
branches
it
of the
feels a
family.
bit Germanic, doesn't it?
Yeah. And beyond that, we get well and truly into the unknown origin territory.
Nice.
Because there doesn't seem to be any real solid evidence one way or the other. One theory, suggested by the OED's etymology section, is that it comes from a Germanic base meaning to prick or to pierce. And so the original sense is like something that pricks or
Sharp.
is piquant and sharp and spicy and such. So that's neat. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
But then there's one line all by itself, apart from the etymology section, but before you get into the senses, that I have just decided is 100% factually correct, based on nothing more than the fact that the OED says it was, quote, apparently attested earlier as, and cited a date of 1332. But it doesn't matter, because I have decided that this is right. And I don't put my foot down very often on these things, but I'm doing it now.
Ryan, I
Because-
support you. I fully support you.
Oh, you do, and you don't even know how hard you support me yet. Because the suggestion is that pickle is an eponym.
Hey! I was so hoping it was going to be an eponym. I'm like, I support you, thinking, it's going to be good, but is it going to be as good as Mark Pancake? Yes, it is.
It is going to be as good as Mark Pancake. Because it says apparently attested earlier as Rosiah Pickle. A proper name, Rosiah Pickle, 1332, which is already awesome.
Brilliant.
And then there's a one Dr. Ernest Klein wrote quote, a comprehensive etymological dictionary of the English language in like the mid 60s. And his entry for pickle suggests, and this is remarkably specific, suggests that it's, quote, probably named after Dutch fisher William Buckles, died in 1397, who developed the procedure of pickling.
That is hugely specific, and I
Very
love
specific. But again, I don't care, because
Mr.
what we have
Pickle.
now is we have Joe Pilates, Mark
Yep.
Pancake, and Billy Pickles. And I could not be happier.
Billy Pickles sounds like he would drink in that pub you were talking about earlier with the big
Yes.
jar of pickled eggs behind the bar.
He's also an early 20th century baseball player, and
Oh,
nobody
for
can
sure.
tell me otherwise. Yeah. This is actually the first time I've tracked down and cracked open a comprehensive etymological dictionary of the English language, but it will not be the last.
I'm impressed.
And I thought I'd share the preface to it.
Oh, nice.
It starts with a little just a two-line couplet before he gets into the preface proper. And so I don't know if this is a quote of its own invention or if it's quoting someone who's just unattributed, but it says, "To know the origin of words is to know the cultural history of mankind."
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so now I like that book a lot.
Yeah.
But also because it gave us the legend of Billy Pickles.
Billy Pickles.
Yeah. So there
I
you go,
must
Pickle.
mention also Pickles the dog.
Pickles the
This
dog.
This is a brilliant nugget of culture that you will be completely unaware of for reasons which
Yeah.
will become clear.
Okay.
I'm actually going to take a second to look this up rather than just give you my usual Amy waffle and make guesses at how this fell out.
Yeah.
But
Incidentally, if waffle it turns out to be an eponym and the person was Amy, we actually have an Amy waffle somewhere, that'd be awesome
Amy
too.
waffles. Pickles, born 1962 or 1963, died 1967, was a black and white collie dog. Known for his role in finding the stolen Jules Rimet trophy in March 1966, 4 months before the 1966 FIFA World Cup was scheduled to kick off in England. The World Cup of soccer, in this part of the world we just call it the World Cup because it's the most, given that football is the most ubiquitous and supported sport in the UK, especially in Scotland, the World Cup was stolen, and Pickles the dog basically found it in a hedge. Yeah.
Nice.
Just the rest of the trophy was found 7 days after it was stolen, wrapped in newspaper, lying by the front wheel of a parked car by the 4-year-old Pickles while taking a walk with his owner, David Corbett, who worked as a Thames lighterman. Corbett briefly fell under suspicion of involvement in the theft. When England won the trophy, Pickles was invited to the celebration banquet as a reward. So there you go. Pickles the dog.
That's awesome.
Yeah, nice.
I had no idea about that story.
So much satisfaction within Pickles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very excited. And I got more
Really
excited
cool.
as it went along, so.
And good work, Little Paulsons. Good work.
Yeah. Well done.
So, the word I'm going to talk about today is hiatus.
Oh.
Given that it's been a really long time since we've recorded an episode.
It has been.
And I sort of started looking at this word thinking that I was pretty clear about what it meant and that it probably wouldn't be that interesting. So I thought, that would be a cool word. Oh, but there's maybe not that much to say about it. Little did I know.
Oh, nice.
So, a hiatus, which is a noun, of course, I felt like it was going to be a Greek-derived word, and
Yeah,
I
that
was wrong.
seems fair.
The
okay.
OED gives its etymology as Latin hiatus, gaping, gap, or opening, from the verb hiare, to gape. And the first citation of this word given in the OED is from 1563. This definition is given as a break in the continuity of a material object, a gaping chasm, an opening or aperture. And the OED notes that this is now rare, this usage, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Also, there are some really lovely citations throughout this entry, some of which are worth talking about, and some of which I just like because they have ye olde wordies in them, and that's fun. We then have the second sense, which is an A-B sense rather than a completely new one, which is in anatomy, which I love to read about and learn about and talk about. In anatomy, a hiatus is an opening or a foramen. Now, foramen is just that. It's a space or a hole. We have the hiatus hernia, which is a hernia in which an organ, especially the stomach, protrudes through the esophageal opening in the diaphragm.
Ugh.
Not pleasant. If you've got yourself a hiatus hernia, get to your doctor. This is not official medical advice, but it sort of is, because, my God, not fun.
Yeah, jeez.
This one particularly caught my eye, so some of the citations here. It's first cited as used in an anatomical sense in 1886. And the first citation given is of the hiatus fallopii, Fallopii, which immediately made my little ears prick up, because it made me think about fallopian tubes, reasonably enough. That's where I've seen that word before. And given that hiatus fallopii is given a capital letter, it made me think for the first time ever, oh, this person's a person. That's why fallopian is, and it's such an interesting and unusual word, fallopian, as in the context of fallopian tube. It gave me great delight to be able to inform you and Ross and everyone else who identifies thus malely that you may not have fallopian tubes, but you do have a fallopian canal.
Really?
So the hiatus fallopii is a foramen or a hiatus situated on the upper surface of the petrous portion of the temporal bone leading to the aqueduct of Fallopius, or the canal of Fallopius. Basically, the canal of Fallopius it's about 3 centimetres long. It is a tube within the auditory meatus, the parts of your brain that make up your auditory senses. And it's called after Fallopio, or Fallopius, because in the 1580s, when he was doing his thing, cool guys got Latin names. That seems to be as much as I can kind of explain beyond that.
Fair enough.
And Gabriele Fallopio, or Fallopius, he was a bit of a dude. He was, quote, one of the most important anatomists and physicians of the 16th century, giving his name to the fallopian tube. But he also did a lot of work on the anatomy of the head and face. And I was telling my husband about this, and he said, so presumably he went, well, I think I've finished with the head and the face. Where else can I look? And that's how it is that we have both the fallopian tubes from the uterus to the ovaries, and the aqueduct, or the canal, the fallopian canal, which is...
Okay.
It's a little space within that part of your brain and the other structures round about it that the facial nerve passes through. Other cool things about Fallopio, or Fallopius: he was the first to describe a condom. He described a linen sheath wrapped around the penis, and he actually reported he had a clinical trial, which is very, very early reporting of a clinical trial. He reported that he tested these condoms in 1,100 men, none of whom contracted syphilis. I mean, that's a happy day.
That's a good day for those 1,000 dudes.
A good day to not get syphilis.
I mean, linen,
every day that you
though.
don't get syphilis is a good day.
Yeah, linen is not like.
Yeah, interesting.
It's
Yeah, it's no latex or latex alternative, shall we say?
It's not what I'd call friction free.
Indeed. Yeah. Moving swiftly on.
Yeah. Ugh.
Before everyone starts wriggling in their seat.
Yeah, no kidding.
The second citation given of the anatomical sense of a hiatus, I enjoyed very much because of one particular word. You'll see what I mean when I get to it. From 1928, diaphragmatic hiatus hernia and esophageal diverticulum were rontgenologically diagnosed.
Sorry, what?
Rontgenologically. And Rontgen was a scientist who, in fact, the unit of radiation is named after Rontgen, Wilhelm Rontgen, who was a German physicist who basically figured out how electromagnetic radiation and X-rays worked. So X-rays existed because of Röntgen, and so at that time in the 1920s, Röntgenologically meant radiologically. So a good day for ignorance.
Why did we ever lose that?
I know, it's good, isn't it?
Röntgenologists out
Yeah,
there.
the
Revolt,
next citation, which also made me laugh a great deal because it manages to sound so rude without it's from Tristram Shandy, which is pretty rude. And I didn't have time to go and look it up in context. I did intend to at one point and I forgot about it. It reads thusly: the hiatus in Futatorius's breeches was sufficiently wide to receive the chestnut.
Oh.
with the definition being given here as a rent or hole in a garment.
Oh man!
I don't know what receiving the chestnut
has to be a euphemism somewhere along the way.
I believe so.
Did you see Gary last weekend? He really received the chestnut on Saturday night, that's for sure.
We then have the sense that I referred to. It's been a long time since we last recorded an episode. A gap or interruption of continuity in a chronological or other series. A lacuna, which destroys the completeness of a sentence, account or writing, or a missing link in a chain of events. That's first cited in 1613. And from a text called Eternal Truth Script. Like, that's a big ask from a title. But, go for your life.
That is a big ask.
And this is probably the sense that I first heard when I first became aware of this. It's a word that I always felt a little bit like, ugh, shut up about, because usually bands go on hiatus.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Now there's a euphemistic usage of a word, because as far as I'm concerned, going on hiatus tends to either mean someone has to go to rehab, or we all have to go to rehab, or we kind of hate each other now and can't bear to spend a single second of our time together. And the other thing about a band going on hiatus is it's usually euphemistically the end of the band.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's usually just when you're too scared to say, I quit.
Yeah.
They don't want to break up, but they're going to.
Yeah. So it's again, a word that I'm used to sort of reacting to with a slight, annoying. And then lastly, two of the most exciting words to find in a list of definitions of a word: grammar and prosody.
Oh.
So a hiatus, a hiatus in this context is the break between two vowels coming together without an intervening consonant in successive words or syllables. And this is complicated because grammar and prosody and linguistics, those are complicated things. Wikipedia has a short and easy to understand, I needed some of those, article about vowel hiatus. And vowel hiatus is another word for diaeresis, which it amuses me greatly that diaeresis does not have a diaeresis in it, because it should, at least with the English spelling. And it's where there are two separate vowel sounds in adjacent syllables with no consonant between them. So, for example, coordination is a diaeresis.
Yeah.
Now, this works, it's interesting how this works in a variety of different languages, because there are lots of languages where vowel hiatus appears, but it's no big deal. So we have Japanese, there's the word aoi, which means blue-green, and it has three syllables. It's pronounced aoi, and it's spelled aoi. So in some languages, nobody cares, and in some languages, many languages disallow or restrict hiatus and avoid it by deleting or assimilating the vowel or by adding an extra consonant. In Greek, for example, I don't know if this happens in modern Greek or if it's just in ancient Greek, but the term movable nu made me so happy that I got excited. But basically, a movable nu is used in Greek to avoid diaeresis or vowel hiatus.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I felt like I'd go and see movable nu and buy their t-shirts.
Absolutely.
And you can't, of course, talk about diaeresis or vowel hiatus without mentioning the New Yorker, because the diaeresis diacritic mark, which is, it looks like an umlaut, those two little dots that go above the vowel, they indicate that there is a diaeresis where there might be a confusion about whether the vowels are pronounced separately or together, as in a diphthong. And the New Yorker, in their sort of style guide, they use diaeresis diacritics for words like cooperate and re-elect. It's not very common to do that in English, but for some reason the New Yorker do it. They have always done it, and they continue to do it.
It makes sense there'd be something like that would... I was trying to think of another example other than coordinate or co-opt, and then I came up with de-escalate. But the words look weird when you see them written out. Yeah,
I often used to think about cooperation when I was a little reader who didn't really know how those words sounded. Yeah. We need the hotline. You've seen that meme, haven't you? There should be a hotline that you can call.
Oh, yeah.
Where you say, how do I pronounce this word? And the person on the end of the line goes, oh, pal. Okay, it's like this.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
But you do, of course, sometimes see diaeresis diacritics used in names like Zoe and Chloe, which are examples of vowel hiatus. And
interesting.
And so that's what those marks indicate. Otherwise, would have Zoes and Clos kicking about, and they wouldn't like it.
No.
So, etymologically speaking, which is something that I should get to rather than just being super duper obsessed with how meanings change over the world, over the centuries. Etym Online lists 1560s as its first citation, meaning break or opening in a material object, especially in anatomy, from Latin hiatus, as the OED said. This comes from the Pi root GHIEH. No diacritic, no vowel hiatus.
Nothing to help.
And God knows how one pronounces such a noise. This Pi root means to yawn, to gape, or to be wide open. Now,
okay.
Yeah, this I found really interesting, and Etym Online is good enough to give you not just a list of cognates, but also entries that link to that particular Pi root. And so it notes that it forms all or part of chaos, a gaping void, an empty, immeasurable space.
Yeah.
Chasm.
Yeah.
Again, like a deep crack in the earth. Greek. This is the Greek one, from Greek chasma, meaning yawning, hollow, or gulf. It's related to the Greek word kaskane, which means to yawn. And we also have dehiscence, which is a lovely word.
Oh, that's
and
neat.
It means to gape. And in botany, it's the discharge of seeds or pollen in plants that split open to expose these things.
Right.
And again, this is the Latin etymology from the Pi root. So we have hiscere or hiare, which means to yawn in Latin. It also gives us the words gap, for obvious reasons.
Right.
Gasp, open your mouth wide.
Yeah.
Gawp, again, open your mouth wide.
I do like that word.
Yeah, it gives us hiatus and it gives us yawn. The
Nice.
University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Centre in the European Lexicon of Pi, Etymon and Indo-European reflexes. So exhausted.
Such a journey.
Such a journey. Lists the meaning of this root as to gape or to yawn, and it has a few more interesting cognates in English. So it has I'm not sure if you pronounce this word achene or achene, achene, which is a small, dry, indehiscent, single-seeded fruit. So again, this sense of splitting open to release your seeds or your pollen in a plant. We have chasm. We also have, I really, really like this word, chasmogamous.
Whoa.
Chasmogamous is a flower that opens for pollination. And then we also have chasmogamy, also a botanical term, the opening of the perianth at flower maturity.
Okay, so you can tell me that, and I believe you, but from now on, chasmogamous is anything that has the nature of a chasm. What a chasmogamous opening that is. Well,
anytime you have the GAM going on, it's the same as the word gamete. So it means that somebody's getting down in some sort of way. So getting down in a Chasm,
Why not?
people can do whatever makes them happy, as long as they're not hurting themselves or anyone else.
Yeah.
We've got dehiss, to split along a natural line. We've also got jibe, with a G or a J, to mock, deride or ridicule. I thought that was quite an interesting one. It's not quite so obvious. You can see why gasp is etymologically related to a word that means to yawn or to gape. Jibe, not so much. We've got gig, as in the terms of a light carriage or a boat. Again, I never know if it's jig or gig. I think if it's a carriage, it's a jig.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. We also have giggle, which they define as to laugh secretly or mockingly, which I thought was interesting. We have gill or gill, a ravine or a narrow stream, and we have Gilrain, Gilrain, which is a river in Gondor in The Lord of the Rings. Because never forget that Tolkien was such a linguistics nerd. He was a professor of medieval linguistics. Yeah. We also have a lammergeier, which is Europe's largest bird of prey.
Oh.
And rather beautifully, a whirligig, which is a child's whirling toy. And of course, the word yawn. They all come from that single Proto-Indo-European root. Gay or gay, or however that is pronounced. Which in itself, it's not very often you find Pi roots that you could argue might have an onomatopoeic sense about them, but I feel like this one does a little.
Yeah. Very cool.
So, it turns out that looking into a big empty space was surprisingly fruitful.
Huh. That's neat. I would never have. Hiatus is one of those words that I think I've probably thought about from time to time, but then immediately came up with against the wall of, I don't even know where to start with this, and so I just didn't. And then, so I'm glad you did, because I would still not know.
I quite love, particularly in anatomy, I love that there are so many words for space. Like a foramen is an opening, a hiatus is an opening. It's like they've gone, well, we've got a thing here and another thing here, and that's just we'd probably better give the space a name somewhere along the line. Because the spaces are just as important as the non-spaces, I suppose.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.